So ladies and gentlemen, it is time for first place playoff of National Energy Sustainability Debate Competition. Our topic statement this morning, Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050. We start with our first speaker from our affirmative school, Holy Faith Convent, Hoover. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this era presents itself as the worst warming period in 2 million years of Earth's history and the loudest wake-up call to date, according to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, in 2022. Honorable moderator, distinguished judges, worthy opponents, fellow debaters, and members of the House, a pleasant good morning to you all. Today I stand before you to express my unwavering support to the motion that states Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition will first begin by establishing the key term of the motion, net zero. According to the IPCC in 2022, net zero refers to greenhouse gas emissions produced by a country or entity that are balanced by the removal of an equivalent amount of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. Note well, ladies and gentlemen, in keeping within the parameters of the debate motion, we, the proposition, are not saying that Trinidad and Tobago will achieve net zero by 2050, but that we could. Today, my illustrious colleague, Anaya Philippit, will elaborate on the points of stakeholder collaboration and policy support and national gas transition. And in addition to that, I'll be presenting 3 compelling points that are backed by reliable authorities. Firstly, Trinidad and Tobago possesses an abundant renewable energy potential. Secondly, energy efficient measures. And lastly, sustainable transport initiatives. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago possesses an abundant renewable energy potential. According to the Trinidad and Tobago Renewable Energy Roadmap in 2022, they have stated that they have set targets of constructing offshore wind turbines utilizing their renewable energy potential of 25 gigawatts of levelized energy. 25 gigawatts, ladies and gentlemen. Also, called for 2024 is the Solar Parks Project, a collaboration between our government, BP and Shell towards meeting our country's energy requirements. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, the installation of solar panels has begun, showcasing Trinidad and Tobago's commitment in meeting net zero emission goals. Secondly, the country continues to recognize energy efficient measures as well as renewable energy in its thrust and path towards achieving net zero emissions by 2050. For example, the synergy between the government and stakeholders' collaboration and promotion of energy-efficient appliances and energy management systems, as well as the previously mentioned mass renewable energy initiatives, such as the Solar Parks Project and the construction of offshore wind turbines, showcases their focus in promoting and implementing energy-efficient measures as well as renewable energy initiatives. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, you too can pay your contribution in becoming an active agent of change in aiding the country in their net zero emission goals by partaking in TNTEC's ongoing dive in replacing evanescent bulbs with LED bulbs. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, with these mass renewable and energy efficient initiatives, net zero by 2050 is possible. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, the country continues to recognize the needs to address the carbon emissions from the transportation sector. For example, according to the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, they have continued their ongoing promotion of compressed natural gas as infrastructure for vehicles as a significant step in aiding in the country's net zero emission goals. Secondly, CNG has been bolstered by our government in their promotion of electric vehicles with 0 pounds of CO2 emissions. 0 pounds, ladies and gentlemen. Furthermore, you too can benefit from taking part in these transport initiative changes, as the government has waived all taxes and duties in net zero vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't be the only one that's seeing the benefits and the luxury we can attain from partaking in net zero emission goals. Therefore, in conclusion, to reiterate, Trinidad and Tobago does possess an abundant renewable energy potential, energy efficient measures, and a sustainable transport sector. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we are urging you to stand with the proposition and be with the motion before us today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Olivier from Vancouver. And we now have our first speaker from our opposing school. Presentation College Bonus, your first speaker. 5 minutes. Begins now.
Go bite off more than you can chew. When your economy, go on through. Honorable Chairperson, venerated judges, most accurate timekeeper, our wonderful audience, and of course, our worthy opponents. On behalf of my team, I welcome you to the finals of this debate. I, Janak, am against the motion and here to prove once and for all that Trinidad and Tobago cannot achieve net zero in 2050. Firstly, as a captain of this ship, I welcome you all aboard, and I will take you on a journey explaining how TNT is a developing country and ergo does not have the funding nor the technology to achieve this goal in such a short time. Next, my second speaker, Uzochi, will set our sails by explaining how TNT is too reliant on fossil fuels and how 27 years is too short for us to start now. Finally, my summary speaker, Vaishnava, will anchor us smoothly, summarizing our points and proving to you once and for all why TNT cannot achieve net zero by 2050. Now, with regard to my proposition's definition, I accept it. In fact, I even support it by saying the reason why net zero explanation of being a balance of what we emit to what we remove is the reason why as a small country it is impossible for us to achieve it in such a short amount of time. Let me elaborate. My first point being Trinidad and Tobago is a developing country, ergo we do not have the funding to achieve this. Now what's important to remember is like unlike the UK and France or other developed countries in this world, we are still in the process of development, meaning we do not have the funds to achieve this. My proposition speaks about the potential we have with the sun and the sea, etc. But potential is not enough. The funding is where it's most essential. And with regard to the funding of solar panels and wind turbines, as according to Weather God Lighting Tech, hundreds of millions of dollars are required for just the installation process alone. This is just the installation. This is not even the maintenance required for such a large project like this. They've listed one example of how one company can achieve net zero. But what about the entire country? What about the entire petrochemical sector, which contributes to 78% of our country's total greenhouse gas emissions? 78%. The general public, by fighting back, by installing LED lights, will not bring us to net zero by 2050, not by a milestone, not in 200 years. It's our industry and petrochemical sector that is needed. Now, with regard to CNG and the transportation sector, Trinidad and Tobago is too reliant on fossil fuels for CNG to be established in time. But my second speaker will discuss more on that. The President of Barbados, Mia Mottley, even sympathized with Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, stating that it is unfair with our financing and our state of debt. It is unfair for us as a Caribbean nation and as a developing nation to be forced upon this unrealistic goal of achieving net zero by 2050. Now, not only do we not have the financing to establish something like this, but as a developing country, Trinidad and Tobago does not have the technology required to achieve this. Now, unlike what my proposition stated, the sea, the sun, the wind is all around us, but the technology isn't. Solar panels, wind turbines, ocean power, hydroelectricity, all these require technology that we do not have. We do not have solar panels. They don't grow on trees. We do not have wind turbines. It does not fall from the sky. We need importation for this to occur. What does this mean? This means that we rely on the time schedule of other developed countries for us to even start such an unrealistic possibility that we can achieve net zero by 2050. So to conclude what I'm saying, Trinidad and Tobago does not have the funding to work on such a goal as achieving net zero, nor the technology required, as we are a developing country, and what we are facing is the equivalent to ghetto tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Presentation College, Jeronis. And now we have our second speaker from Holy Faith Convent, Cuba. Your 5 minutes begins now.
A pleasant good day to the Honorable Moderator, distinguished judges, worthy opponents, and esteemed members of the audience. Today I stand before you to showcase my unwavering support for the motion, Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050. My illustrious first speaker, Vandana Fikira, has already elaborated on the topics of Trinidad and Tobago's renewable energy potential, the energy efficiency initiatives, and the sustainable transport initiatives. In addition, I will be elaborating on the topics of the ability to leverage our vibrant natural gas industry to achieve net zero, as well as the high level of stakeholder collaboration and policy support in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, I will also be refuting and rebutting the opposition's logical fallacies. To begin, Trinidad and Tobago is committed to diversify its energy mix to reduce fossil fuel generation and achieve net zero emissions. This relies on stakeholder collaboration and policy support. However, ladies and gentlemen, we do not need to worry, as Trinidad and Tobago already has a high level of engagement from governments, international stakeholders, businesses, universities, and other stakeholders. Therefore, this also counteracts my opposition's point that we do not have the funding for technology required for the net zero transition. Let me restate that we do not have the funding required for technology to achieve the net zero emissions by 2050. However, if we, the proposition, are saying that Trinidad and Tobago has a high level of stakeholder collaboration and policy support, then this funding and resources will be provided by our international stakeholders as well as our local stakeholders. So this problem that the opposition has presented is now moot. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations in 2021, which emphasizes the importance of moving on. Trinidad and Tobago has the ability to accelerate leveraging its vibrant natural gas industry, as we are in a strong position to utilize both our competitive and comparative advantages in the natural gas industry. Therefore, we will be able to utilize our vibrant natural gas industry, which can provide funding to purchase the technologies required for the net zero transmission. This also goes against the opposition's point that Trinidad and Tobago will not have enough funding. Additionally, the opposition also brought up the point that we are too reliant on fossil fuels to achieve net zero emissions. However, if we can utilize our vibrant natural gas industry, then this weakness they have identified can also be our strength in achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Honorable House, the proposition has presented numerous reasons as to why Trinidad and Tobago will be able to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. As my illustrious first speaker, Vandana Fikira, stated, we have an abundant renewable energy potential, as well as the ability to implement energy efficiency initiatives and the sustainable transport initiatives. I have also furthered the points that Trinidad and Tobago has the ability to leverage its vibrant natural gas industry to accelerate towards net zero emissions, and we have a high level of stakeholder collaboration and policy support, which contradicts the opposition's main points that we do not have the funding and that we are too reliant on fossil fuels. However, two of our main points go directly against the arguments brought up by the opposition. Therefore, we, the proposition, are saying that Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Thank you for listening, and we urge you to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Holy Faith Convent, Cuba. We now have our second speaker from Presentation College, Shogunas. Your 5 minutes begins now.
My grandmother used to tell me, speaking with your mouth full, real rude. But I can't help but do that today because while presenting my arguments, I am simultaneously eating my opponents. Pleasant good afternoon. All protocols observed. I would like to thank my colleague Shenak for presenting the financial and technological restrictions hindering Trinidad and Tobago from reaching net zero. My name is Uzachi, and today I will be talking on Trinidad and Tobago's reliance on fossil fuels hindering us from reaching net zero, as well as the ridiculously short time frame that net zero by 2050 is. To clarify, ladies and gentlemen, the notion today is not that we can achieve net zero, but that we will, and I can assure you we will not. The possibilities that my opponents speak about is simply not true. There's a possibility that a comet comes from the sky and hits me today. But does that mean it will happen? No, ladies and gentlemen. Let me clear that up before I continue. My opponents have talked about the natural gas industry helping us reach net zero. Is this the same natural gas industry, as stated by my colleague Janak, which produces 78% of our carbon emissions? So we're going to emit more to bring down our emissions? Is that what my opponents are stating? That allows me to go into my first point, which is our reliance on fossil fuels. That lipstick you're wearing today, you know what you need? Fossil fuels. Balloons to decorate for your birthday party. Fossil fuels again. These carbon-producing fossil fuels are necessary in everyday life. Similarly, one thing in Trinidad and Tobago that is necessary that we can't live without, transportation. As reported by the Ministry of Works and Transport, there are 1.1 million fossil waste-powered cars in Trinidad and Tobago. These cars will always produce high amounts of carbon dioxide. And you know what the government of Trinidad and Tobago is doing for this? As reported by the TNT Express, there was a new gas station constructed in Canupia a month ago without an electric vehicle charging station. Yes, we're building gas stations to facilitate this already fossil fuel dependent sector and neglecting what my opponents have talked about with electric vehicles initiatives and these things. And my opponent have come here to talk about tax initiatives that are going to be in place. But do we have the time to put it in place? No, ladies and gentlemen. These things needed to have been in motion for years for us to be on track to reach net zero. They have talked about stakeholders will fund us, but they are not funding us now. But now is the time frame, 27 years is what we have to reach net zero. We are not denying that we can reach net zero, but we are saying that we will not reach net zero by 2050. And that allows me to go into my second point, which is the ridiculously short time frame that reaching net zero by 2050 is. We all set goals, whether that may be to lose weight by the end of the year, or for my older audience to buy a place or continue to purchase that place that you want to call home. We all set goals and realistic time frames for us to achieve it. But I hope the government and Trinidad and Tobago doing the same. Let me hold my tongue before I get in trouble today. They have set goals that net zero in 27 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is simply impossible. My opponents reiterated the fact that energy transition is the main way that we are focusing to go towards net zero. But Klaus Smith of the Scientific American stated that energy transition takes 50 to 75 years to happen. Are we to jam all that work in the short 27-year time frame? No, ladies and gentlemen, this is simply impossible. And our reliance on fossil fuels, as well as the incredibly and ridiculously short time frame that reaching net zero by 2050 is, shows that Trinidad and Tobago as a nation cannot achieve net zero by 2050. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Presentation College Chabonas. Time for summary arguments. Begin with our opposition school. Presentation College Chabonas, of this speaker, your 5 minutes begins now.
Seeds of dreams for sale, seeds of dreams for sale. Don't worry, if you water the pepper sauce, it might, maybe, hopefully not really turn into a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition has stood up here today and has tried to sell you seeds of dreams. My name is Vaishnava and I am the summary speaker for my school. And I am here today to prove without a doubt why Trinidad and Tobago cannot achieve net zero by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition has keep on saying it's possible, it's possible, it's possible. The debate asks if it's possible? No. They have always said could, would, have given it potential. But the fact remains that, as my first speaker stated, we are not a developed country, and thus we cannot reach net zero by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, compared to other developing countries such as the EU, we lack the funding to put in place net zero by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, they have not once stated any ways they want us to get funding to put in place these large tasks and these large undertakings. Ladies and gentlemen, they have stated solar panels and many other forms of renewable resources. But where are they coming from? Can they fall from the sky? Can we make them? Well, as my first speaker stated, we cannot make them, so surely they must fall from the sky. This afternoon's forecast, heavy showers, solar panels, light showers, wind turbines. Ladies and gentlemen, we simply do not have the technology to put in place net zero before 2050, and they have not once stated how they wish for us to get this way. Furthermore, they have not once touched on their own definition and once stated how they could remove carbon emissions. They have only stated plans of dreams for how they could possibly reduce these things, but have not once stated any way to reduce carbon emissions and bring back the balance towards net zero. Furthermore, they brought up cars and vehicles, but they have ignored the fact that, as my second speaker stated, 1.1 million of our vehicles run on gasoline. This leads me to my third point. We are incredibly reliant on fossil fuels. 100% of electricity comes from fossil fuel-based products. All of our vehicles run on 1.1 million of vehicles run on gasoline-based products. Even up to CNG still needs to start on petrol. And even electric vehicles run on electricity. Where's electricity generated from? Fossil fuels. Ladies and gentlemen, we as a community are far too reliant on fossil fuels. As a matter of fact, we are the country of oil and music. So I'm not sure they want to take away oil and we have to power our car on music. Play some Marshall Montano and go down the road. Ladies and gentlemen, they have brought up natural gas, but they have not once stated how we could utilize this. They have not once stated how this is applicable to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I could say I have the potential to marry into the royal family. I could say I have the potential to become the Duke of Wales. But right now, the only royalty I see is I'm not the royal. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact remains that, as I have stated, they are trying to sell you dreams. 27 years is far too short. As my second speaker stated, we are on track to achieve net zero, yes, but by 2080. 27 years is the time they take for 2 Zamkatri to grow, ladies and gentlemen. How do they expect us to achieve net zero in 27 years? The time frame is simply impossible. More developed countries have taken up to 50 to 75 years to achieve this task. Yet they expect us, with no resources, with the solar panels that drop from the sky, to achieve net zero by 2050. So to conclude, we as a nation cannot achieve net zero by 2050 because we are not developed enough when compared to bigger countries such as the EU and America, because we lack the technology. And to put this in place, which my opponents have not stated anyways to counteract that, because we are far too reliant on fossil fuels, with 100% of our electricity coming from fossil fuel-based products and majority of our cars running gasoline, and because 27 years is far too ridiculously short to achieve net zero when other bigger countries have done so in 50 to 75 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that I have casted the anchor of truth and have showed you why, without a doubt, we cannot achieve net zero by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure debating in this competition, and it was a pleasure in this wonderful journey with you all. I'd like to thank everyone who was present, and I'd like to thank my opposing school as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Presentation College, Chabonas. And now we have our third speaker from Holyfield Prophet Cooper. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable moderator, respected judges, esteemed opponents, fellow debaters, and especially the distinguished members of the House and of the audience. I stand before you today as the proposition speaker for the proposition supporting the motion that Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050. Before I begin, I would like to say that the opposition incorrectly stated the motion and claimed that Trinidad and Tobago will achieve net zero by 2050 when the motion clearly states that Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050. Now I'll continue explaining and summarizing the points provided by my first proposition speaker, Vandana Fakira. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency in 2022, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Chamber in 2021, Trinidad and Tobago possesses favorable conditions for implementing renewable energy sources such as solar power and wind power. The country also understands that implementing energy-efficient initiatives like renewable energy and energy-efficient measures are necessary in Trinidad and Tobago's path to net zero by 2050. The country also recognizes the carbon emissions from the transport sector as a major contributor to carbon emissions. Moving onward to my second proposition speaker's points, Anaya Philippit, she highlighted that Trinidad and Tobago relies on the help from stakeholders like the government, businesses, industries, universities, communities, and even our civil society as crucial in Trinidad and Tobago's path to net zero by 2050. And finally, for the last point provided by the proposition, Trinidad and Tobago can leverage both its comparative and competitive features in the natural gas industry. Now, let us delve into the opposition points and examine how we, the proposition, rebutted and refuted them with our own compelling points. The first opposition speaker mentioned that Trinidad and Tobago is a developing country with a lack of funding, but Trinidad and Tobago can rely on the help from stakeholders like the government, businesses, industries, and international collaborations to fund the transition to net zero, as stated by my illustrious second speaker. The opposition stated that stakeholders are not funding us, so we have an ultimatum. Trinidad and Tobago can use the revenues from the oil and gas sectors to help in the funding in the transition to net zero by 2050. Moving onward, the opposition also stated that for even bigger countries, transitioning to net zero has taken 50 to 75 years. But to this, we the proposition asked, should Trinidad and Tobago not try because of this simple time-set area? We are a small country, but that does not mean that we cannot be mighty. And finally, the opposition stated that Trinidad and Tobago is too reliant on fossil fuels. But to this, we the proposition say that you can leverage its natural gas sector to transition to net zero. Honorable House, the motion that is let me restate. The motion before us, Trinidad and Tobago can achieve net zero by 2050, has been proven to be true due to the fact that Trinidad and Tobago, due to the fact that Trinidad and Tobago possess abundant renewable energy potential, is implementing energy-efficient initiatives and sustainable transport initiatives, can rely on the help from stakeholders like the government, industries, and businesses, as well as policy support. And lastly, the fact that Trinidad and Tobago can leverage its natural gas sector. Honorable House, distinguished audience members, and even our esteemed opponents, we urge you to stand with us, the proposition, in support of the motion. Thank you all for listening to the proposition today.
Thank you. Holy Faith Conference, Cuba.